The sun was bright that Thursday afternoon in Surulere, Lagos. Parents stood outside the school gates, chatting in groups, shielding their eyes from the heat as they waited for their children. Sarah stood across the road, holding a small lunch bag. It was for her youngest daughter, Lily, who had forgotten it at home. Sarah's white blouse clung to her back in the heat, but she didn't mind. She had promised Lily she would bring it. Her eyes scanned the school gate, smiling as the children poured out, some laughing, others rushing into waiting arms. A familiar honk sounded behind her. It was Kelvin, her husband, parked in the car just a few meters away. He gave a small wave. She smiled back, thankful he had made it in time. Kelvin was multitasking, as always. One hand on the steering wheel, the other flipping through emails on his phone. Business had been booming lately. Their printing press was handling several big orders, and they were saving to expand. Despite the stress, Kelvin felt they were winning, until that moment shattered everything. A loud screech filled the air, followed by the panicked screams of children and parents alike. A yellow Lagos bus, the kind that never cared for traffic laws, swerved off the road. The driver had lost control while trying to overtake another vehicle. The crowd scattered. Sarah didn't move fast enough. Kelvin looked up too late. He saw the bus mount the curb. It was heading straight toward where Sarah stood. Then, the sound. Metal. Flesh. Screams. Silence. He threw the car door open and ran. People rushed in. Blood stained the pavement. Sarah lay on the ground, her body twisted unnaturally, her head bleeding, her eyes fluttering like she was struggling to stay awake. Kelvin dropped to his knees, cradling her, screaming for help. Lily stood nearby, frozen in shock, crying out for her mother. The ambulance took forever to come. Kelvin didn't let go of her hand the entire ride to the hospital. She kept asking, "Where is Lily? Is she okay?" He kept saying, "Yes, she's safe. Just stay awake. Stay with me." Hours passed in the emergency room. The corridors were filled with whispers, people pacing, and nurses rushing from one room to another. Angela, Sarah's younger sister, arrived breathless, tears pouring down her face. She hugged Kelvin tightly, then sat with the girls. When the doctor finally came out, his face told the story before his words did. "Her spine is damaged. She's paralyzed from the waist down. We will keep her stable, but she may never walk again." Kelvin felt the floor fall beneath his feet. Paralyzed. Sarah. He walked into her room later that night, pretending to be strong. She was awake now, her face pale, eyes tired. When she saw him, she forced a weak smile. "Kelvin, my legs. I can't feel my legs," she said, her voice trembling. He walked to her slowly, knelt beside the bed, and held her hand tight. "I'm here," he said, brushing her hair from her face. "I'll take care of you. Don't worry." And he meant it. For the first few months, Kelvin was everywhere. He bathed her, fed her, managed the house and the business. He became the mother and father, the nurse, the driver, the cook. Sarah sat in her wheelchair in the living room, watching him with love and guilt in her eyes. She hated needing so much help. She missed being the strong one. Angela came every weekend to help, and even during the week when she could. The girls adjusted faster than anyone expected. They still laughed, played, and hugged their mother tight. Sarah tried to stay strong for them. But sometimes at night, when everyone had gone to bed, she cried quietly into her pillow. Kelvin began to change. Slowly at first. He no longer smiled as often. He stayed longer at the shop. He drank more than usual, not to get drunk, but just to sleep. The weight of everything sat heavy on him. He didn't talk about it. He just carried it silently, hoping it would get lighter with time. It didn't. One evening, Sarah called him as he sat on the sofa staring into space. "Kelvin, I know you're tired. I see it every day. But I still need you," she said gently. He nodded. Said nothing. He looked at her, sitting in that chair, her once vibrant face now tired, and he felt angry. Not at her, but at the life that had done this to them. He began to miss being touched, being admired, being heard. And that was when Jenny stepped in. Jenny was Sarah's best friend. She had been away for some time, handling a family matter in Port Harcourt, but when she heard about the accident, she rushed back. She came with gifts, helped with chores, played with the kids, and sat with Sarah, offering comfort. But she also watched Kelvin. And Kelvin, broken and exhausted, noticed her too. One night, after Angela had taken the kids for a sleepover and Sarah had gone to bed, Jenny stayed behind to help Kelvin tidy up. They sat in the kitchen, talking quietly. Kelvin opened up a little, and for the first time in months, someone listened without judgment. Jenny reached out, placed her hand on his, and whispered, "You don't have to carry all of this alone, you know." That touch, that whisper, ignited something dangerous. A spark had been lit, and neither of them was ready for what it would burn down. The night after Jenny's touch lingered longer than it should have, Kelvin lay awake in bed beside Sarah, who was already asleep. Her breathing was soft, her body still. He stared at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside him. Guilt should have swallowed him whole, but it didn't. Instead, he felt seen for the first time in months, and that feeling was dangerous. In the days that followed, Jenny returned often. She brought laughter back into the house, laughter that Kelvin had forgotten. She helped with Sarah's sponge baths, brushed the girls' hair, cooked meals, and even went on market runs. Sarah, grateful for her support, welcomed her with open arms. She never imagined that the friend who once stood beside her at her wedding would be the same woman standing between her and her husband. Kelvin tried to resist the pull. He kept reminding himself of his vows, of the woman who trusted him, who still smiled despite everything life had taken from her. But the ache in his chest only grew heavier. Nights were lonely. He missed being a man, not just a caretaker. And Jenny, with her warm eyes and soft voice, offered an escape. It began with small touches. A hand on his back when he washed dishes. A playful tease when he mispronounced a word. Then, one evening, while Sarah slept in the bedroom and the girls watched cartoons in the living room, Kelvin and Jenny kissed for the first time in the kitchen. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was quiet. Wrong. But it felt like breathing again. Kelvin pulled away, breathless. "We can't do this," he whispered. But Jenny only looked at him calmly and said, "Then don't look at me like you need me." The guilt came later. Every time Sarah wheeled herself into the room and smiled at him. Every time Lily asked him to carry her. Or when Angela called to ask how they were holding up. He would sit outside at night, staring at the empty road, wondering how he got here. But instead of pulling away from Jenny, he fell deeper. They began meeting in secret. Sometimes it was after Jenny helped put the girls to sleep. Sometimes it was while Sarah was at therapy or resting. Their stolen moments grew longer, and their conversations more intimate. Jenny whispered to him about starting over, about how he deserved to live again, not as a nurse, but as a man. Then one day, she said something that changed everything. "We could leave, Kelvin. You and I start fresh. You don't owe anyone anything anymore." He wanted to scream at her. He did owe something, everything, to Sarah and the kids. But a part of him was tempted. Tired. Desperate. And temptation has a voice that always sounds sweet when your soul is dry. It wasn't long before Jenny started pressing him harder. "You're wasting away here," she told him. "That woman, she's a shadow now. Don't you see it?" Kelvin wanted to fight her words, but they had already taken root in his heart. He started staying longer at the shop. He missed Sarah's therapy appointments. He forgot to pick the girls from school once, something he had never done before. Sarah noticed the change, but she didn't speak. She just grew quieter. One night, while Kelvin was preparing to leave for a supposed business trip, Sarah wheeled herself into the room and asked softly, "Do you still love me?" Kelvin froze. The packed bag in his hand felt like a stone. He looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who once sang to their babies in the kitchen, who had fought so hard to stay alive after the accident. "I'm tired, Sarah," he said instead. She blinked slowly. "We're all tired, Kelvin. But love stays even when the body gives up." He didn't reply. He walked past her, brushing her chair gently, and closed the door behind him. He didn't come back that night. 2 weeks later, Sarah found out. Angela had gone to the shop to collect some papers. The business was gone. Sold. Everything they built together, the printing machines, the contracts, the customer list, gone. No warning, no explanation. Kelvin had emptied their joint account and disappeared. The landlord came knocking with eviction threats. Sarah sat in her chair, trembling, staring at the letter Angela brought home. She didn't cry. Her tears had dried weeks ago. But deep inside, something shattered. Her husband had left. And he took Jenny with him. Kelvin landed in South Africa with Jenny, carrying nothing but stolen money and borrowed dreams. She called it a fresh start, but for Sarah back in Lagos, it was a collapse. Sarah's world shrank. The home she once filled with warmth was now quiet and cold. Neighbors whispered. Angela tried her best to help, but bills piled high. The shop was gone. The landlord gave them 2 months to leave. Even Lily, now barely 10, started asking questions. Is Daddy ever coming back? Sarah never answered. Each night, she sat in silence. The chair beneath her felt like a prison. She played back the moments, searching for signs, wondering how she missed them. Her best friend, her husband, both gone. Her heart broke, not just from the betrayal, but from the silence that followed. No goodbye. No call. Just absence. She stopped eating. Her weight dropped. She missed therapy sessions. Angela, now carrying most of the burden, begged her to fight, but Sarah didn't know what she was fighting for anymore. Meanwhile, Kelvin lived a different kind of reality. At first, life in Johannesburg felt like freedom. He and Jenny stayed in a serviced apartment. She wore bright colors, spent recklessly, and whispered sweet things when the lights were off. Kelvin tried to enjoy it. He went to bars, smiled at strangers, convinced himself he had escaped the cage. But beneath the surface, cracks formed fast. The money ran faster than he expected. Jenny refused to work. She called him her man but spent his money like water. When he asked her to slow down, she laughed. You didn't run away to be broke, did you? He found a small job at a warehouse to keep them afloat. It paid little, and each morning he woke up more tired. Jenny started staying out late. Sometimes she didn't return until dawn. She said she was making contacts, but her lipstick told a different story. Then came the night everything fell apart. Kelvin came home early from work to find another man in the apartment. Tall, well-dressed, and smug. Jenny didn't panic. She didn't scream. She only said, "You were fun, Kelvin. But you're not enough anymore." Kelvin snapped. He raised his voice. He shoved the man. A fight broke out. Neighbors called the police. By morning, Kelvin was in a South African jail with a charge of assault and a torn lip. Jenny didn't bail him out. She disappeared. The Nigerian embassy processed his deportation. He was sent back home with nothing. No money, no luggage, not even his passport. He arrived in Lagos looking thinner, older, broken. He had no one to call, no home to return to. He slept on the floor of an old friend's tailoring shop for a while. No one recognized him anymore. The man who once drove a Toyota Highlander, who wore Italian shoes and signed checks like a boss, now borrowed shirts and begged for work. Back in Soyulia, Sarah lay in her hospital bed, pale and weak. One evening, while Angela spoke with the doctor outside, a stranger passed by and heard Sarah crying softly. He paused. Something in her voice pulled him in. His name was Greg, a tall, kind-faced widower who had lost his wife to cancer 2 years before. He walked in and introduced himself gently. "Forgive me. I was passing by. You were crying." Sarah blinked, unsure how to respond. "I didn't know anyone heard." He smiled. "Sometimes, the loudest pain is the one we hide." That was the beginning. Greg came back again, not as a stranger, but as a friend. He brought books, flowers, small stories. He listened. Not once did he ask about Kelvin. Not once did he pity her. And slowly, Sarah found her voice again. With Greg's encouragement, she returned to therapy. She began using crutches. Her legs, once dead, showed small signs of life. She started painting again, a hobby she had buried in sadness. And when Angela saw her sister smile for the first time in months, she cried. Sarah was still in pain. The scar would never vanish. But now, there was something else growing beside the pain, hope. And far away, Kelvin sat alone in a makeshift room, replaying every choice he made. Regret, it turns out, grows loudest in silence. Time passed quietly. Sarah moved to a small apartment with Angela and the girls after the landlord took the old house. It wasn't fancy, cracked walls, rusty water taps, and mosquitoes at night, but it was safe. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like peace. She continued therapy twice a week, learning how to stand for brief seconds, how to sit without pain, how to smile without forcing it. The pain never disappeared, but she stopped letting it control her. And Greg, he stayed. He wasn't loud. He didn't come bearing gifts or promises. He just showed up. He would sit beside her after therapy, holding her hand gently. When she felt ugly in her chair, he told her, "You've never looked more like a queen." And slowly, the woman who once saw herself as broken began to see something else, strength. Greg was a widower. His late wife had died of breast cancer, leaving behind a small house in Ikoyi and an adopted son in university abroad. Greg had money, yes, but he didn't carry himself like a rich man. He didn't try to fix Sarah. He just walked beside her. The children adored him. Lily called him Uncle G. Angela watched him closely at first, protective over her sister. But with time, even she softened. He wasn't perfect. He was just present. One afternoon, while sitting under the mango tree in Greg's compound, Sarah asked, "Why me? Why help me?" Greg looked at her quietly for a moment. "Because your pain found me. And because love, real love doesn't ask for legs, or beauty, or a perfect past. It just wants truth." Her eyes welled with tears. But this time, they weren't from pain. Months passed. With Greg's support, Sarah started an online art business. Her sketches, many of them inspired by her pain, caught attention on social media. People began ordering customized portraits. She wasn't rich, but she was independent again. And then, on a quiet Saturday morning, in the garden behind Greg's house, surrounded by lilies and sunflowers, Sarah and Greg exchanged vows. No guests. No crowd. Just Angela, the girls, a pastor, and a gentle breeze. Sarah wore a simple cream dress. Her crutches stood nearby. Greg, in a navy blue suit, held her hands and said, "I choose your scars and your light." It was the beginning of a second chance. Meanwhile, Kelvin sat in a small wooden kiosk near Ohota bus stop, selling recharge cards and used belts. He no longer checked mirrors. His beard grew wild. He was known as Barber Kelvin by area boys who mocked him when he begged for food. His hands, once used to sign business papers, now shook from cheap alcohol and regret. Every day, he walked past billboards, wondering what Sarah would be doing now. Sometimes he wrote her messages and deleted them. Sometimes he cried while reading old text messages. But he never had the courage to return. Until one day, a friend, the only one who still talked to him, told him about a job opening for a private driver in Ikoyi. Big man looking for driver. Good pay, NA quiet house. NA widower. Kelvin went. He shaved. He wore an old shirt. He needed that job. When he entered the gate of the compound, he saw the garden. It looked familiar. His hands began to sweat. As he walked toward the front door, he heard laughter. Then the door opened. Sarah stood there. Radiant. Alive. Not in a wheelchair, but on her feet, leaning on a cane, her posture proud. Behind her stood Greg, smiling gently. Kelvin's breath caught in his throat. Sarah looked at him, calm but unreadable. She didn't shout. She didn't weep. "Kelvin," she said. "You're the driver." He couldn't speak. He turned around and ran. Ran like a man escaping fire. That night, he sat alone by a gutter, shaking. He sent her one final message. "I'm sorry. For everything. If I could take it all back, I would. But I know I don't deserve a reply. I just needed you to know." Sarah read the message. She placed her phone on the table and said nothing. She owed him nothing. Not even a reply. Kelvin didn't sleep that night. He sat under a bridge near Ohota, holding the small phone he had borrowed from a street boy to send his message to Sarah. Each time the screen lit up, he hoped for a reply. None came. Morning came cold and grey. The streets came alive with Lagos noise, bus conductors screaming routes, hawkers chasing customers, but Kelvin heard none of it. He just stared at his cracked shoes, wondering how a man could lose everything twice. He thought of Jenny, of the lies, the sweet words that had led him to abandon the woman who once prayed for him every night. He thought of Sarah's face at the gate, standing proud, strong, alive. A face that no longer needed him. Kelvin knew he could never undo the damage. But he wanted to at least apologize in person, even if she turned him away. He gathered courage and made his way back to the house in Ikoyi. The gates were open, and a gardener was trimming the hedges. Kelvin stopped outside, unsure whether to enter. He could see Sarah in the distance, sitting under the same mango tree where they once took family pictures years ago. This time, Greg sat beside her, his hand gently resting on hers as they spoke softly. Lily played nearby, laughter echoing through the compound. For the first time in years, Sarah looked free. Kelvin stood at the gate, his hands trembling. He wanted to call out. He wanted to fall on his knees and beg her forgiveness. But as he watched, Sarah turned slightly and saw him. Their eyes met. She didn't move. She didn't shout. She simply looked at him. Not with anger. Not with hatred. Just silence. Kelvin lowered his head. He understood. He turned around and walked away. Each step felt heavier than the last. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't stay there. He had to carry his shame alone. Sarah sat still as Kelvin disappeared down the street. Greg squeezed her hand, asking softly, "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." And she was. Sarah had lost so much. She had been broken, betrayed, abandoned. But she had survived. With Angela, with her children, and with Greg, she had built a life from the ashes Kelvin left behind. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to reply to his message. Her silence was the only answer he would ever get. She looked at Greg and smiled faintly. "Let's go inside," she said. As they walked back into their home, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a soft light over the garden. Kelvin never contacted her again. Some said they saw him driving a Danfo bus months later, thin and quiet, always keeping to himself. Others said he moved to another city to start over. But no one really knew. And Sarah, she lived. She healed. She painted. She laughed with her daughters and held Greg's hand when the nights felt heavy. She never spoke of Kelvin again. Because some wounds don't need words. Only silence. Moral lessons. In life, loyalty is tested not in moments of ease, but in seasons of hardship. Kelvin had a good woman. One who loved him, stood by him, and trusted him. But when the storm came, he chose escape over endurance. And for that, he lost everything. Love is not only romance or beauty. It is service. It is staying. It is choosing someone, again and again, even when life doesn't look the same. Sarah, though broken, chose to rise. She fought with dignity, surrounded by those who didn't run. And because of her quiet strength, she found peace again. The ones who betray trust may roam far, chasing shadows, but regret always finds them. And sometimes, the greatest punishment is not anger or revenge, it's being forgotten by the very one you once took for granted. Let this story remind us. Never abandon those who once carried you. Never trade truth for temporary comfort. Because healing is loud, and sometimes, forgiveness is silent.
Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe for more amazing and life-changing stories.